They will not stop, and they never intended to. The nation of Iran is enriching uranium as never before in pursuit of the ultimate weapon, a nuclear bomb. And now Iran's intelligence minister has made an unprecedented threat. What is it? And could it trigger nuclear war between Israel, Iran, and the U.S.? Here's Chris Mitchell from Jerusalem.
Iran's intelligence minister issued the warning. He claimed Iran's nuclear program is peaceful, and Iran's supreme leader Khamenei issued a fatwa forbidding a nuclear weapon. But he added, if pressured, Iran could change course.
If a cat is cornered, it may show a kind of behavior that a free cat would not. If Iran is pushed in that direction, then it wouldn't be Iran's fault, but those who pushed it. Under normal circumstances, Iran does not have such a program and intent at all.
But these are not normal circumstances. Alavi's threat comes after Iran announced it's now enriching uranium one step away from military-grade uranium and researching uranium metal, a key component of a nuclear bomb.
As we see it, Iran will not stop enriching uranium. They never wanted to. They don't today, and they will not in the future.
While the enrichment goes on, Iran's Khamenei and President Biden are in a face-off. Khamenei says no new deal unless the U.S. lifts sanctions. And Biden says no sanctions relief unless Iran returns to the negotiating table.
Will the U.S. lift sanctions first in order to get Iran back to the negotiating table?
No.
They have to stop enriching uranium first.
Here in Israel on Tuesday, Israel Defense Forces estimated Iran is 2 years from getting a nuclear bomb. Secretary of State Antony Blinken recently said they might be weeks away. But some say it's simply a political decision by Iran's leaders.
Technologically and scientifically, we don't see the time as a real problem. So it's not the time problem, so you can say weeks or months or a year or 2 years, only about the political situation you want to represent.
In the meantime, Israel's chief of staff has already said Israel's military is preparing operational plans in case Israel needs to attack Iran's nuclear facilities.
Well, Chris is here with us. Chris, you know, the Iranians believe in what's called the Mahdi, the 12th Imam, and they believe that there'll be devastation before the 12th Imam is revealed. So they wouldn't mind killing a whole lot of people with a nuclear weapon. I mean, am I right in that assumption?
No, exactly, Pat. We've reported on that for several years. In fact, former president from Iran, Khamenei, he said that it was going to be part of the Imam, just like you said. It was going to be what they wanted to do to precept the coming of the Mahdi. A nuclear weapon is exactly what they would need to go ahead and do that. And not only would it perhaps precipitate the coming of the Mahdi, as you said, but it was also, just create that chaos, exactly what the Mahdi is required before he comes.
Well, the Israelis are not taking this stuff lying down. What would an Israeli strike look like?
Well, they already have operational plans. General Kovavi said the other day that they were preparing operational plans. But, Pat, we've talked about this for years, and you know that the IDF has those plans. The general is sending a signal both to the U.S. and Iran that they would go unilaterally if they needed to. So other Israeli leaders are sending the same signal. What would they use in a possible strike? F-35s. They have a lot of F-35s from the U.S. They would use tankers to be able to get those F-35s, F-16s, and any other warplanes to Iran. They would also probably incorporate special operations during that time. And right now, Pat, they can fly over Saudi airspace because the Saudis, the UAE, all these Gulf states see Iran as a existential threat, not only to them, but to Israel as well. And, they would probably also have covert operations as well. And, the assassination of Iran's chief nuclear scientist just a few weeks ago, some people believe by Israel, was just a sample of what they could do.
Well, now, what's the meaning of this, Iran's intelligence minister? What's behind that?
Well, certainly it's pressure on President Biden, Pat, and some are calling it extortion. And what you've seen recently is a crescendo of orchestrated threats First of all, they said they would enrich uranium more than the nuclear deal allows. Then they went to enrich uranium to 20%, one step from weapons grade. Now they're researching uranium metal. The only use for that is a nuclear weapon. And so now this threat by Iran's intelligence chief, and it's not the only one, Pat. A major newspaper said in a headline recently, why Iran must seek a nuclear bomb. So what they want desperately right now is to get the U.S. to take away these economic sanctions that have crippled Iran's economy.
What are the Israelis telling you that they look for the Biden administration?
Well, right now, first of all, Pat, they're waiting for a phone call. President Biden hasn't yet called the prime minister while he's been president. He did call him right after the November election. The White House has kind of dismissed it, but here in Israel, it's very concerning. So it looks like the Mossad chief, Yossi Cohen, might be the point man on the Iranian nuclear deal with Israel. He's supposed to meet with the president about that. Now, if they wanted anything, Pat, if they had their druthers, they don't want a nuclear deal at all. But if there was a nuclear deal, they would, first of all, want no sunset clauses, which the 2015 nuclear deal had. They want no money for terror. In 2015, that deal gave Iran billions of dollars. That went to Hezbollah and other proxies here in the region. So that's what they want. They would also want ballistic missiles part of that inspection. And they want inspection of military sites. So if they had their druthers, they don't want a nuclear deal at all. And I think that's the message Israel and perhaps Mossad chief Yossi Cohen will be sending to the administration.
Chris, if I could ask you, what's your gut feeling about this whole thing? Do you think Israel's going to strike them?
Well, Pat, you know, it seems like a perfect storm, and I'm not sure it goes to that measure, but it's certainly ill winds blowing. My gut says it's ratcheted to a level that I haven't seen, with Iran finally coming out in the open and saying, if we could go and have a nuclear weapon. And then Israel, and not only just the general chief of staff, but other Israelis are saying, we'll go ahead and strike Iran if we has to. For Israel right now, I think the pressure on them is like they don't see the kind of ally they had in the Trump administration. And they're saying if Iran is going to keep pressuring and crossing our red lines, we may just go ahead and have to strike Iran. My gut feeling is probably something's going to happen to prevent that. But it's really, really serious right now here, Pat, with all this scenario, with what's going on in Washington, Tehran, and Jerusalem. We'll see what happens. Certainly, it'd be time to be praying for the protection of Israel and the peace of Jerusalem.
Well, Chris, thank you, friend, for the terrific report. Chris Mitchell, our head of our news department over in Israel, and it's just a wonderful report, but it's a frightening thing to think. I don't think that God's going to allow this world to be blown up with a nuclear explosion. I just don't think that's in the cards. But it's certainly something we need to watch because it's very real. It's not something that's being delayed for a year or two. I mean, it's something that could happen in the next few weeks.